The leaders, the shakers, the game changers, the Millennial Movers.
My name is Samantha Phelan, and I'm from Mount Pearl, Newfoundland. I'm a digital media and monetization consultant for professional sports teams and influencers. So I worked with the St. John's Ice Caps, who were the AHL affiliate of the Winnipeg Jets and the Montreal Canadiens for numerous years, for 5 or 6 years. And from there, I just started working with sports teams as soon as they relocated to Laval, working with professional sports teams across MLB, NFL, EPL, NBA, myriad of different sports teams, on really helping them dive into what it takes to create revenue off of digital channels.
Have people ever doubted you'd be able to make it in this line of work here?
I don't know, honestly, it doesn't really matter to me if there's doubt from other people. It's how grounded am I in believing the concept of the value that I have to offer. I think the biggest risk for me is knowing that 50 years time, my role, my job in general probably won't exist because of how fast social's changing, technology's changing, everything's changing. My job didn't exist 20 years ago. It didn't exist 10 years ago. And I think that it's very realistic to be constantly thinking about the fact that it's probably not going to exist 10 years from now. It's going to look different. But the grounding feature in my job, the way that I see it and what I'm most passionate about, is consumer behavior and user behavior. And I know that people's attention from a brand perspective, or just in human nature of wanting to be seen and heard, that is always going to be something that you can capitalize off of in some way. And so I see my role potentially changing, and there is risk involved in that, but the fact that I'm aware of that in the first place, I think puts me in a position to be able to shift and make changes in my business along the way. Pros, how connected you are, and I'll sort of say trendy in that right now, I think there's a lot of companies and a lot of brands who are really putting an emphasis on social media, and so your intel just is worth a whole lot more, even than it would have been 10 years ago or 10 years from now. I think the biggest risk, in my opinion, is how connected you have to be to stay on top of it. I think it's a 24-hour industry, and you have to be very connected when you work in this business. And I just did a TED Talk on this, but I think there's a lot of mental health issues that are correlated with social media and usage around social media, and I think it can take a really hard toll on people having to be so connected in order to be on top of their game for this.
You kind of touched on it there, but how does it add to society?
I think the connection in general is great. If you look at recent events, I just wonder if you had things like Twitter back in the days of any of the most devastating things that have happened in our history. If you look at things that had happened during wars, and if we had the transparency to know certain things that were going on behind the scenes, but they just didn't have that type of distribution channel back then, I think we would have seen a lot less devastation, because you'd have a lot more public pushback from some things like that.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into specifics, but in general, I think there's a lot of positives that come from it. I think the sense of community that comes from social is beyond what any of us could ever fathom, and it can be really, really good for people who don't feel as though they have a sense of community immediately around them, to find community through online spaces and work off of that.